And now.
All right, here we are with only 7.5 minute delay. It's getting closer. T minus 7:28 and counting. Hi, this is Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang for Thursday, some day in some month of some year. It's the day after the Beatles day. And to my delight, I walked into Starbucks today for a meeting, and Beatles music was all over the stereo. So I immediately thought, well, that's interesting that they're playing that, but of course they're not going to have any records. Whoops. They were selling Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, the Help album, and Rubber Soul at the counter at Starbucks. So we're in a new thing. This guy, I think you recognize. That's what's your name again?
Lauren Feldman.
Yeah,
I got a puppet.
yeah. So that's Robert Scoble, and we have another regular, Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there.
And
Hi there.
we may be joined by some other folks on Cauliflower, and if they get there, I'm rather than do this, so that we hear that music. If you call into Cauliflower, please let us know through Twitter or whatever. And our special guest today is Brett Taylor.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks a lot for showing up. We got the notice this morning via Kevin Marks' tweet or FriendFeed of an important announcement, or what I believe is an important announcement from you regarding, well, you tell, what's Tornado?
Tornado is an open source version of the web server we built at FriendFeed that currently serves all of FriendFeed's traffic. At FriendFeed, we built the entire site in Python, which is a pretty popular language, but there hasn't been a huge, the Python community hasn't converged on sort of a single web development framework that's really taken off. Sort of like, there's no equivalent to Ruby on Rails in the Python community. Probably the closest thing is a project called Django. And so when we started developing FriendFeed and we were looking at the large number of projects for doing web development in Python, none of them really met a lot of our technical needs, so we ended up building our own from scratch. And over the course of developing FriendFeed, we started adding more and more real-time features to the site. And as a consequence, our web serving infrastructure changed quite a bit to be very honed for these types of real-time services. And so we had realized we had created something that we thought would be broadly useful at FriendFeed, and we had been planning on open sourcing it, just too busy. And then when we got to Facebook and we talked to the people here about the technology we developed and the possibility of open sourcing it, they were extremely supportive and excited to do it. And so in the past few weeks since we've arrived, we've just been spending time kind of refactoring the code to make it more useful for other developers, and we released it today. So essentially, Tornado is a web server, and it's written in Python, and so it's ideal for Python developers. And it's particularly unique in the sense that it can support tens of thousands of simultaneous connections to the server. And the reason that that's important is real-time web services like FriendFeed use a technology called long polling to enable a real-time user interface within sort of a page of HTML. And to enable long polling on a site like FriendFeed, it means that every active user of the site maintains an open connection to the server, waiting for new updates to be received. And to maintain an active connection for every active user of the site turns out to be a technical challenge that's really not addressed well by existing frameworks, but is addressed pretty directly by Tornado.
Robert Scoble, you have some questions?
No, other than do you think that this will be used inside Facebook's existing service in some way?
You know, it's a little hard to tell at this point because Facebook has a very, very large product that has a lot of bells and whistles, and I think it's a very non-trivial task to incorporate a new piece of core infrastructure like this. So I doubt it will be used in the short term. That said, there's a lot of analogous services that Facebook does that solve similar technical problems. for example, the Facebook chat feature that you probably have seen on the bottom right corner of your screen that lets you do real-time chat with your friends. That uses similar types of real-time technologies to enable chat, and we've been talking a lot to the chat team about how they solve some of the interesting engineering problems that they faced and how we solve them, and we're doing a lot of sort of mutual engineering exchange at this point, but it's hard to tell, how it will be used concretely here in the future.
Kevin Marks, what do you think? Do you think this will be adopted quickly?
I've had a quick look at it. It looks very interesting. It reminded me a little bit of what you said. What you said about not finding what you want in existing frameworks. So I was interested to know what you thought of Twisted and how much that met your needs, because some of the concepts seem similar in here.
Yeah.
And
I
also
think
just for
Twisted has this unique property where there's a lot of people contributing code to it, but not as many large websites actually using it. And that particular attribute became abundantly clear when we tried to use it, which we did when we first created FriendFeed.
Gotcha.
A lot of the protocols implemented within Twisted are extremely buggy. There's about 3 different implementations of HTTP servers within the Twisted framework shipped by default, all of which are broken in different ways. And this is, I think, if you go on the internet and search for people actually trying to use it, that frustration is we're not unique in our experience. So Twisted has some interesting underlying concepts, but it definitely just wasn't, you could tell it wasn't in wide use, at least the HTTP server part of it wasn't in wide use by like a real company. We've had much better success with the open source projects that were developed by a company to solve a specific real purpose. Just as an example, Memcached was developed by LiveJournal, and it was serving tons and tons of traffic. And so when you use it, it was obvious that it was in real world use because it worked. There weren't the obvious bugs. It didn't break when you did something slightly outside of the bounds of normal behavior. Twisted, we had sort of the opposite experience. And so it has a lot of similar concepts. Our hope is that because Tornado is actually in use on FriendFeed and serving all of its traffic today, that hopefully developers can use it right away and not encounter some of the same types of headaches that we encountered with Twisted. Certainly a lot of the goals are similar of the project.
What about...
I think it's distinct. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, except
No,
I
it's
was
okay.
interrupting twice.
I was just going to say the other thing is distinct is we were focused on web development, not generic network programming.
Right.
As a consequence, Twisted implements sort of an HTTP server, but it's not optimized for high-level web development. Tornado ships with a lot of building blocks that you need to build like real websites, like secure cookie signing and templates, and all of the things that you would expect in the web development framework. So it's also a little more accessible at a higher level for programmers, which I think is pretty important.
What do you think the impact, Brett, is going to be on the other real-time infrastructure plays that are going on, PubSub, Hubbub, and RSS Cloud? How do you think those systems will use Tornado?
I'm not sure. Our hope is, though, that this can enable a lot of people building real-time services, just make their user interfaces better. One of the examples that we ship with the product is a chat room, and using that demo, you could build on top of it to make a real-time messaging service and connect it with all these open protocols from Facebook Stream API to PubSub, Hubbub, and hopefully will enable a new class of apps just by making it a little easier to get off the ground.
I just want to say to somebody who just was talking about coming in from, I believe, Africa, and that their bandwidth is limited. There are a few people who are already taking this, the audio of this feed, and remastering it in an homage to the Beatles, by the way, and putting it on some server that some guy named Jack on FriendFeed has been doing this. So there will be a version of this, probably open source shortly, and soon we'll be delivering the video version of it to YouTube so that you can download that, and it is going to be made available for download as soon as I can figure out how to be able to use the RSS part of the feed. So following up on Brett, on your comments about the use of Tornado, is the source code going to be a good example of how to use how to address the API?
The Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. One is it is really a generic piece of infrastructure, so it's not tied to any particular API. It's just a building block you can use to make any web application. But we did, I think most modern web applications interact with APIs as a part of their service. So we do have built-in support for Facebook Platform and Facebook Connect, FriendFeed's API, Twitter's API, and Google's APIs, just to make it a little easier to get off the ground, particularly in the areas of authentication. And so included with the product is a Facebook Connect demo and another demo just demonstrating how to authenticate with Google OpenID. And so we're hoping to make it easier for people building, Facebook apps or just incorporating third-party authentication into their sites. It should be a little easier to get off the ground with Tornado.
But what about the chat implementation? Basically taking you had examples that you released with the
Yeah.
API 2 that supported pretty much everything except the real-time stuff. So could you take the two pieces of code and cobble it together into
Now that you
something?
bring it up, I'm kind of embarrassed we didn't do that, Steve. That's a great idea. Yes, it could be possible. And we should have had that demo because it would have worked really well. And we will probably make that demo now that we just talked about it because it's a great idea.
Excellent.
If Brett, if you were on the Google Wave team, how would you be using this technology?
I imagine, I mean, just like I mentioned, Facebook having a large, complex product, I imagine Wave is fairly well developed at this point. So I imagine, like this is kind of a core piece of infrastructure. So it's hard to like remove your core piece of infrastructure and insert a new one without having it break your entire site. And so I imagine that, Wave is pretty far down the path of choosing the real-time infrastructure. That said, I think there's my very limited understanding of Wave is that it's an open and federated protocol, and perhaps Tornado could be leveraged for people federating with Wave to enable some real-time features on top of it. Certainly, because it's written in Python, I think it's accessible to a very large number of developers. Certainly a lot more than, well, Java has a lot of usage. I think it's a lot faster to develop web apps in Python, and so hopefully this will enable that type of functionality to a wider range of developers.
How's the possible, hopefully probable integration of the FriendFeed API into Facebook API going?
We're still figuring stuff out. I mean, probably the first couple weeks we were like figuring out, how to find our desks and figuring out what projects we were going to work on.
Well, how's that going?
We actually do have desks now. Confused the whole thing. It's pretty cool. We learned how to connect to our email system, so we're communicating to people now. But yeah, I think that it's a little too early to tell how things are going. The great part is here. I mean, I think as I said when we first got acquired, is that everyone here sort of shares our vision for real-time communication and openness. And so what's great is I think the teams have really gelled in terms of philosophy, but there's a huge number of details just in terms of talking about how Facebook's platform is going to evolve and our existing API and how they relate. So I really can't really give any specifics right now just because we haven't really figured it out ourselves. We're working on it.
Go ahead, Robert.
Since you had a fresh look at the code, was there anything that while you were going back through it that you said, man, that was ugly, or damn, I wish we had done it differently?
Yeah, it turns out like lifting up the kimono, you start wondering like, ooh, do I really want someone seeing this? So we ended up cleaning up our own code in the process of doing this. We sort of refactored it. We also wanted to reduce dependencies in the code base. So essentially you can use the modules that we've included as a part of Tornado sort of in an a la carte basis. So if you just like this one module we reproduced, but you don't want to use the rest of Tornado, it should be very easy to do that. So we did a lot of work to kind of clean up and refactor the code base just with external developers in mind, because it certainly was, internally focused previously.
Kevin, I'd like to take this up a level and sort of broaden the questions here to include one of the things that you're working a lot on in your new role at British Telecom, which is and I'm going to let you pronounce it, but I think it adds up to activity streams.
Right.
So the question that I have is, what's going to happen when this kind of abstraction layer that's being developed, the kind of thing that Facebook is doing with FriendFeed, which is basically absorbing it into some degree of interoperability with what they have done or what they are about to do. And we were over at, Robert and I were over at Facebook a couple days ago talking with Chris Cox and some of the people at
On the mobile team.
And one of the questions that I had related to if you develop the notion that is called everyone, the everyone status inside of Facebook, you essentially have a competitive stream of status updates that are public in nature that could be expressed in a similar context to the Twitter streams, and that seems to sort of vector into the same kind of activity streams discussion that you're involved in. Do you agree with that?
Yes, broadly. The activity stream stuff is mostly about trying to converge the way we express these different activities from different places. So it's in some ways it's doing the kind of thing that FriendFeed already did internally, where they normalized all the activities from different places into a common format, but trying to do that in a way that's interoperable. And the group we've got people on that from Facebook and MySpace and Google and Yahoo and a bunch of others who are trying to converge this stuff. So from what I see, the Tornado stuff looks fairly complementary to that, as it's handling a different piece of the problem. It's handling the web serving and polling stuff, and it's not dealing directly with the data structures of the streams and the feeds that are flowing through it. I don't know if that's fair, Brett.
Yeah, it's a sort of lower level essentially. Hopefully, if you wanted to develop a real-time system using activity streams, this would be a building block, but it is at a lower level. It's essentially a piece of infrastructure more than it is a standard.
As compared to using the FriendFeed API, which is already parsing a lot of stuff and integrating it for you, but then normalizing it into FriendFeed's interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
go ahead. And I just want to welcome Mark Hander on the phone from somewhere in some part of the country that I've never been in.
Yo, yo, yo.
You're at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right?
Yes, I'm heading out to the airport, and I want to congratulate all the FriendFeed people who are really now Facebook people. And I want to congratulate all the Google people who are really BT people who've gone back to his British roots. And we totally love people from Texas who pay for radio shows.
Yes, we do. Rackspace rocks. So I didn't mean to interrupt, Kevin. So let's get back to Kevin and join in as you want to, Mark. Just no rolling of buds, since we don't have you on video.
So from what I see of Tornado, it's an encouraging alternative to other frameworks that we've got, because being able to do long polling and things like that has always been a bit fiddly with the ordinary web-based frameworks. I noticed, Brett, you had an integration with App Engine there. I haven't had a chance to dig through that yet. Have you been able to get the long polling pieces working there or not, or are you still constrained by the App Engine timeouts?
Yeah, we're not. It essentially explicitly does not support a lot of the long polling and real-time features, but we wanted to support WSGI, which is the Python web serving standard, so people could deploy at least simple apps on App Engine. But if you want to use some of the non-blocking and long polling features, it just won't work in App Engine right now. Unfortunately, the standard on which Python web serving is currently based, called WSGI, doesn't support a lot of modern web serving techniques. That's a pretty well-known problem in the Python community. It's just an older standard, and if your Python program is beyond the complexity of a simple CGI script, WSGI really doesn't serve you well. And so we added support for it, but only a subset of the features that we support in Tornado are available if you use App Engine or WSGI.
So to host it properly, you need a server that will let you do raw Python hosting, not just CGI hosting. That's
correct. And we have in the documentation a recommended setup for people running in production. It's pretty comparable to the way people run Ruby in production. I can go into the technical details, but it's probably beyond the scope of this conversation.
That's something we should just flag up for people like Rackspace and the other hosting services to pay attention to, because it's something we've had trouble with before with hosting Python, is you end up having to run your own box.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, when you say that it's beyond the scope, I'm already lost. So
I'm sorry. I was just
Sorry.
realizing that I've been talking at a very low level technical details. I apologize.
no, I'm not asking you to apologize. I just
Geeking out a
don't
bit here,
think
sorry.
that if there's something that you think is beyond the scope of this conversation, I think you're already well there. So feel free to keep talking.
No, it's fine. I think Mark's point was very good, though. I mean, it is the challenge with advanced web services that enable, real-time connections like FriendFeed. Current hosting providers, a lot of them won't work properly for it, but a lot of new ones, for all the modern hosting providers, whether it's something like Rackspace or something more generic like EC2, a lot of them are going towards virtual machines where you can run your own custom setup and it should work pretty well. It just depends on how flexible your hosting provider is.
Robert?
Can you tell us a little bit about what FriendFeed was what the infrastructure FriendFeed was hosted on? Because we never heard that.
Yeah, sure. We actually built our own servers, and we run in our a data center that we lease space at. So it's pretty basic. We didn't use any managed hosting though.
Yeah.
We partly because we wanted to build our own servers. We keep the working set of data in FriendFeed is kept in memory, so we can serve large numbers of requests, and we managed to do that at a very cost-effective basis by building our own computers.
Right. Very cool. Was that going to be? Why didn't you choose a cloud hosting solution? Why did you feel you had to build your own servers?
Cost, essentially. In particular, high memory machines are at a very high premium with most hosted and managed serving providers, simply because a lot of them run lots of virtual machines on single physical machines, and so memory is premium. With our own machine, memory prices are low enough, we were able to scale up our service at a lower cost simply because we were buying the memory directly.
Yeah. How many machines were you hosting on?
I don't know off the top of my head, and that's private too.
Okay.
So.
Well, you seem to be pretty open about. I'm surprised by the speed with which you were able to pull this together. I mean, it's essentially 2 weeks. I mean, Paul was on vacation last week, so.
Yeah, Paul was at Burning Man while I was doing all this. Yeah, I gave him a lot of crap. No, just kidding. The good thing is it was mainly Facebook support. David Recordon started here about a week ago, actually, and he's leading Facebook's open source initiatives. And there was just really wide organizational support for openness. So when we had sort of this idea in our head and we came here, and not only we didn't encounter any roadblocks, people here just chipped in and helped it along. This is really great to see how committed this organization is to openness, and I think that's the reason it happened so quickly.
What are you hoping that other programmers are going to learn by looking through your source code?
Hopefully they'll find problems with it and submit fixes. That's number one. That's one of the benefits of open source. The other thing is I really hope, I'm going to start working here at Facebook on the Facebook platform. And one of the things I think a lot about is how Facebook as an organization can make it easy for developers to create really great applications, whether it's on the Facebook platform or just creating social services in general. I think that really benefits Facebook and the Facebook ecosystem of applications. And to me, my main hope, if I can look back a year from now and say, wow, look at all the great Facebook apps that this piece of infrastructure enabled that wouldn't have been possible before, that would be a really great thing. And so I'm just hoping that one of my favorite apps, 6 months or a year from now is built on Tornado, and I can just feel good that we help those developers get those apps along. That will be definitely our metric for success.
Mark Cantor, are you going to develop on this platform?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was just teaching a class at Paul's alma mater at Case Western, and I have 25 students who are all chomping at the bit. I've got them working on Google Maps and Google Calendar APIs now, and we're also implementing some Viso friending. so we can do distributed friending, because we wouldn't want all our social graph sitting on the Facebook servers. We do want to bust open those data silos, but anytime we hear about an open source platform like this, also we're going to be talking about this stuff in Amsterdam next week at a Digital City Summit, where Ben Cervini has been doing very similar work in Amsterdam on shared servers and open source servers for municipal services. So now, have you guys thought about gatewaying into Laconica with Evan?
Who are you asking?
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood what you said.
He's talking about gatewaying into the open source project called Laconica or Identica. It used to be.
Yeah, I mean, seems like a really interesting idea. Right now, those services, I believe, are written in PHP. So that's from a technical perspective, this is written in Python, so it's not entirely obvious how applicable it would be. But that said, interoperability would be something that would be very easy to do. And as an open source project, I would expect someone would develop that, which is great. This is a great part about an open source project like this is third parties can introduce support for any service, and hopefully it will be in an interface that lots of other developers can leverage because they're sharing the same underlying framework.
Something that you did very nicely at FriendFeed was the ability to log into multiple services, so you could bind in through your Facebook and Twitter and Google accounts, and draw the stuff in. It seems like, from what I haven't actually looked in the code yet, but it seems like some of that's in the Tornado framework as well. So the basic model is not that the user has an email address, the user has a bundle of different identities. Is that right?
So we actually didn't abstract at that high of a level. We packaged the code so that you can easily connect with Facebook Connect, Google, Twitter, Facebook, and OpenID and OAuth. So we have those building blocks in there and a couple of demos of how you can use those building blocks to have your users log in. But we didn't abstract away user identity in general. We just made it easy to implement the authentication, but how you store and think about users is not included in the package. It's up to the application developer. We did that on purpose because it's a lower level framework on purpose. Our problem with a lot of the existing frameworks we were developing FriendFeed is there is often an impedance mismatch between the assumptions of how you run your site and how you actually want to run your site. And particularly with multiple identities and things like that, there's a lot of application semantics that you have to assume when implementing something like that. And we thought just providing the building blocks would be infinite. It takes away 90% of the problem. And how you want to store that in your own database is really up to you as an application developer. So it's certainly the building blocks are there for a system like the one that we built. But it's really up to the applications how they want to incorporate, third-party authentication like Facebook Connect into their apps.
Because, I mean, what I've seen with existing frameworks is they still have the email, password, send you an email out, dig it out your spam folder, registration model baked in. And one of the ways where FriendFeed transcended that.
Yeah, in fact, if you visit the chat demo that is linked to from a variety, so from the blog post to my blog, it logs you in via OpenID to another service. So, I mean, all of our demos encourage using third-party modules like Facebook Connect or Google OpenID. But that said, we don't dictate how identity works on your application because we feel like that's an application level decision. Whether you want to let people log in through multiple methods, how you want to store that in your database, how your user interface works. It certainly encourages that model, but it is at a lower level than I think a lot of frameworks implemented.
Brett, FriendFeed was designed for a user base of 1 to 5 million people. What would you have to rewrite to make it work on Facebook for 300 million people, 400 million people?
A lot. I think that web application performance is generally bound by architecture. What I mean is your data storage mechanism horizontally scalable? Meaning, can you scale it by simply adding more machines to your data center? And Facebook's infrastructure is a very sophisticated piece of infrastructure. And it turns out that things like Tornado are a building block for large systems like that, and it probably wouldn't need to be changed much to accommodate lots of traffic. You just make more front-end servers and you're done. But the hard part of building scalable web applications is the backend, the data storage. And so that's something that we would have, if we were to actually, the stuff we built at FriendFeed, it pales in comparison to the infrastructure engineers have built here simply because they built it for 300 million users. So, and in a very evolutionary manner, obviously, as the site grew.
Right, but in the case of many of the what I would call affinity groups on Facebook, those are a lot smaller than the entire pool of users. I mean, people seem to work in work groups or in groupings according to interests, etc. So, is the scalable issue all that different than what you already were dealing with?
It is very different, yes. I mean, I think that I think if you actually, if any software developers listening, there's a Facebook engineering blog that you should check out. There's some really interesting blog posts about some of the problems Facebook engineers have solved to solve their very unique scaling problems given the number of users. There's a great post actually about the Facebook chat service that one of the engineers did about scaling it. It turns out that even though people interact in smaller groups of people, the whole point of Facebook is the global set of connections, so you can interact with anyone in the world that you happen to know. And so you really can't fragment it too much or it loses a lot of the value of the network. And so as a consequence, it is a really significant engineering problem. But that's actually one of the most fun parts about coming here. I mean, just as an engineer, I mean, it's so much more fun solving a problem for 300 million people because even if it's the most mundane product feature in the world, it's a really interesting engineering problem. And that's a really fun thing. I mean, it's just everything's sort of more of a challenge and more infrastructurally interesting.
But you come from from Google, which had similar kinds of scale issues. So, are you just more comfortable at that kind of scale?
Yeah, I think we're comfortable with it. The interesting thing about Facebook, and the reason I think it's a really fun set of engineering problems here, is that it is kind of unique because of how personalized it is. Google has a lot of interesting infrastructure, but the problems here are quite different in the sense that everyone viewing Facebook is viewing a different thing because it's personalized to them and their social network. And the infrastructure problems that are presented with that unique problem, it turns out to just be a different engineering problem than giving, the same 10 search results for everyone who types in a particular query. And I think that, to me, is one of the most interesting challenges here as an engineer.
Where was I going to go? The Cassandra project, which was developed at Facebook, was just used by Dig, and it is just starting to be used by Dig to manage its servers. Have you played around with that at all and thought about how you would join some of these technologies into Cassandra?
The good thing is that they're very complementary. Cassandra is a data storage service and Tornado is a web server, so you could very easily write a web application that used Cassandra as a backend and Tornado as a front end. So they solve two distinct problems of building websites. And the good thing is Cassandra, when I mentioned horizontal scalability, that's sort of its focus. And it was really, really neat to see that Dig was using it. I personally haven't looked into it in great detail, though.
So now that you're done with this, what are you gonna do at Facebook? What caught your eye already? Just being inside the Facebook world.
I'm going to be working on the Facebook platform. My specific role we're still working out, but that's where my passions lie because I'm very interested in. Yeah, I was just at a startup, and our constant struggle was how do we get users using our product, and Facebook's platform is like really unique in its ability to get applications users. There's a large number of companies that have built their businesses on the Facebook platform as a consequence. And so to me, that just solves one of the most fundamental problems in technology and for web business as a whole. And so I'm really excited about working on it. But since it's my third week here, I'm still learning everyone's names. So I don't know exactly what I'll be doing yet.
Just rewinding a little bit, how would you describe the impact of your exploration of real-time technologies, and how do you see that as progressing at Facebook?
I've always been of the opinion that real-time is kind of, for a long time, there were social products and there were not like non-social products, and now as the web is evolving, almost every product on the web is becoming social. I mean, and so, and I think that's what's so exciting about products like Facebook Connect is you can take a website that previously wasn't social and make it social. I think real time might have a similar type of ubiquity in the near-term future, meaning sites that were previously very static are slowly but surely going to incorporate more and more real-time features because I think people's expectations are going to change. Just as they did with social products, they want to see a personalized view of the web when they browse it. I think people will want to see a real-time web now as they're browsing. They'll want to see what's changing in real time. And so that when you're in your web browser, it doesn't feel like you're just reading a static page. It's you're watching, a real-time system evolve in front of your eyes. That obviously doesn't apply to every product, but I do think that it applies to a large number of products we use on a daily basis. And I'm hoping that some of the work we're doing and just some of the thought work that people in the community are doing will help influence that trend.
What about, I don't really want to get into the fight aspect of these adoptions. Robert mentioned it earlier, the PubSub Hubbub and RSS Cloud. Can these two technologies live side by side, do you think?
I think in general, I think engineers are a little more practical than maybe all the people arguing on blogs. They'll probably use both if both exist, or one if it's the site that they want to integrate with. I do think that there are some interesting scalability problems. We were the first site actually to integrate PubSub Hubbub when Brett Slatkin and Brad announced it at the TechCrunch Real-Time Conference. Since then, we get millions and millions of PubHub SubHub pings a day on our service, and it was actually impacting our site reliability for a while. We had to sort of quarantine that traffic to a set of servers just so that it wouldn't impact end users. I think it has a lot of promise, but I do think that there's a lot of important details that people are working out with all these discussions about how to make real time and pulling versus pushing and all that. They all have different infrastructural requirements. So the standard that we introduced at FriendFeed that's gotten some adoption called SUP, Simple Update Protocol, is sort of an alternative approach. I think it's very typical of this stage of technology that there's a lot of competing approaches because people are still kind of figuring out what will work best in the long term. And I think, maybe it'll take a couple of years, but a couple of years from now, we'll probably have a more cohesive picture of what technologies work best and where. And this is a really healthy process in the meantime of people having arguments and engineers encountering these technical problems and discussing them openly. And it's really just the natural process of engineers figuring out what works and what doesn't.
Jesse Stay in the FriendFeed chat room is asking, when are we going to, or he's asking about when we're going to see real-time features that we've gotten used to on FriendFeed move over to Facebook. And I guess that leads to a deeper question. Have you talked to Mark Zuckerberg and the other people on the teams about their philosophy of real-time and why haven't they gone to a more real-time stream that flows down your screen?
So actually, I haven't been involved in a lot of those discussions here at Facebook. I mean, I certainly have talked to the homepage team a little bit, but I've been focusing a lot on just getting FriendFeed people integrated and trying to figure out our roles here. I can say just from a personal standpoint, real time is very complex in the sense that it can be kind of overwhelming. I think I've heard a lot of people describe FriendFeed as a fire hose in the past. Perhaps some of you actually use those words. Yeah. And so, Facebook is available to 250 million users, and I think making real-time accessible to that broad of range of a user base is a really challenging product design problem. And so as much as I want to see real-time features integrated to Facebook, I do think that Facebook, we're solving a much harder problem just because of the breadth of the user base here. And I think that I take that really seriously. But I don't actually know all the details of their philosophy just because I haven't been focusing on it since I arrived here.
And Kevin, do you think the activity stream group who have been discussing, I believe Chris Messina called it an open friend feed concept, do you think that we need that now?
Oh, definitely. I think the point of it is the kind of thing that Brett was just saying. We've had a lot of people experimenting with how these bits fit together and building standalone solutions. And we're at the point now where we've got enough practice that's working that we know how to do things that we can start agreeing on standards on there. It's often a mistake to come up with standards before you've got implementations. This is kind of like Brett was saying about Twisted, where they built a bunch of stuff that seemed like a good idea but didn't have any practical implementations. Whereas once you've build something, you've got a set of people who are doing something very similar, you can then draw out the common factors and say, okay, this is the pieces we standardize. And if you look at the sort of the open web standards that have come out over the past few years, it's mostly been getting people together who've built fairly similar things and converging them. If you look at the OAuth effort, for example, that was very much taking the best of the existing auth protocols and coming up with a common way of doing it. And similarly with portable contacts, where we said, okay, we've got 6 contacts formats. They're all basically the same thing. Let's merge them into something that we can use and then have it straightforward transforms between them. So the activity streams can be looked at in that way as well, to say there's a whole bunch of different sites that are generating updates about things we do on the web and off the web that have timestamps that have people attached to them. And FriendFeed is a great existence proof of the value of converging different streams from different sources in one place. So let's see if we can find a way to express this in a way that we can easily manipulate them back and forth without having to have one site do the work of all that processing.
So in other words, we throw away all of the connectors in effect that FriendFeed laboriously coded and switch to. I mean, how does this work?
Well, hopefully it means that hopefully we can use the connectors that FriendFeed built, so we can map the output of the FriendFeed API into activity streams. Will be a sensible thing to do. But also it means we don't have to build the outer product of all the possible connectors. We can say if there's a lingua franca in the middle, we can have n connectors rather than n squared connectors being built, and that's the value of it, to say, in order to support Twitter format and FriendFeed format and Facebook format and Open Social format and whatever else format, you have to then build something that translates everything into everything. If we can have a standard thing in the middle, we can translate them through. We can. It's much more straightforward to extract the pieces you want or just build the new piece that you need to add.
Brett, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really excited about all the activity stream standards. I mean, actually, it turns out that Facebook Stream API uses the activity stream standard already. And so, the challenge, I think, as Kevin said, is making standards that are both practical and open. I think some of the standards have suffered on the practical aspect. And so, as long as there's actually engineers in the room who are actually building these products and using the output of these systems, I think it's destined for success. The ones that haven't been successful are sort of a committee of people who don't actually write code every day. And I think those are the ones that end up in sort of a bad state. Just so you all know, I have about a minute left. I'm sorry, I just looked at the clock and I have somewhere to be at, well, it was actually at 1:50, but I can stay on for another minute or two.
It looks like that Facebook just has been shipping an @reply feature that's similar to Twitter's @reply feature. What has kept them from matching some of the other features that FriendFeed implemented, like the like feature? Facebook has likes, but I can't see all my likes. I can't go back in time and search them. I can't see all the likes that Steve Gillmor did. When do you think we're going to see an advancement of the platform in that area?
I really love to tell you. You may have to ask me in a few weeks. I'm just not familiar enough with the current state of things to answer questions accurately. So I'm really sorry. It's just kind of still too new here, basically.
Well, I just think in general we've come a long way from what I used to think was a sort of Facebook disease, where people who had been very, very open and clear suddenly had this kind of murky layer of, well, that's an interesting idea and we'll take that feedback back, kind of a approach. And I think that it's obvious, given the speed with which you've rolled out this this open server, and I think that the pressure that's being brought to bear by groups, including the Activity Streams group, to keep Facebook honest and keep the FriendFeed architecture available until you guys figure out what you need to. I think
that was the goal. I mean, I think the nice part is that we aren't entirely sure, exactly how our product's going to evolve yet, but our hope is that this is a statement to our commitment to be open and transparent about the process. And so I'm really, really happy that you saw that too.
All right. Well, I think this is a good note to wrap this on. This is Steve Gillmor. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank everybody who showed up, including Mark Cantor from somewhere in Ohio. I don't know where you are, Kevin, but it's close by. Robert
San Jose.
Robert Scoble over my shoulder, and Brett Taylor. Thanks so much, and we'll hold you to that. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.